Welcome, and thanks to all of you who are joining us for today's webinar, Create Clarity. This is the second part of a four-part series based on the organizational health model that Pat Lencioni introduces in his latest bestseller, The Advantage. Our presenters here are Ralph Kickert and Rishi Bhaskaran, two of our consultants here at Strive. As official providers of Patrick Lencioni content, they will be discussing the 6 questions that every organization needs to answer in order to eliminate confusion and reach goals faster. Ralph, over to you.
Well, thank you for joining Rishi and myself on our discussion on creating organizational clarity. We believe the greatest competitive advantage for an organization is to develop their organizational health. We're going to talk a little bit more about organizational clarity, but before we even start there, I want to just talk with you, Rishi, about organizational health.
Sure.
And because to me, if we create an organization that is healthy, we have a huge competitive advantage over an organization that is not.
I agree. And when working towards organizational health, it's important to recognize that there's 2 areas or 2 requirements for success. And I think perfecting both these areas will allow you to maximize success. So the first side is the left column on the screen there, which is the SMART side. Now, the SMART side includes strategy, marketing, finance, technology. You know, the stuff that they teach in business school.
Great stuff that every organization needs to have.
Yep. Yeah, Wall Street talks about it. Business publications talk about it. Like you said, Ralph, very critical. Unfortunately, the other side gets largely ignored, unlike the attention we give the left side. So the right side is healthy. Now, that talks about minimum politics, minimal confusion, high degrees of morale and productivity, very low turnover amongst our best people.
And you say, they don't get as much credit to that side. You know why? It's much more difficult.
It is, yeah.
If I'm hired to be specialized in finance or in strategy, well, it's much harder to be an expert in people.
Yes, it is.
And at the same time, run a business or run an organization.
Now, here's the funny thing, though. I appreciate you saying that, Ralph. As much as it's harder for the healthy side, it's becoming more and more harder to differentiate yourself on the smart side.
It is.
With technology today, knowledge can easily be duplicated. And now here's the cool thing. There are a few healthy organizations out there, companies like Southwest Airlines, Zappos, and they're totally open to showcasing their strategy, which is really their culture. They'll tell the world their competition, and they don't worry about it because it's not easy to emulate their culture.
But really their strategy, if you could say, is to create that culture that no one else can easily copy. And that is their differentiation.
Absolutely.
That is their profit maximization strategy is through their culture.
Absolutely.
And they do the other things very well at the same time.
Absolutely. And Patrick, in The Advantage, he talks about the fact that if we help organizations get better at this healthy side, the culture side, then becomes the multiplier effect for the left column, which is the smart side.
Yeah, so let's go further on this one here. We talk about organizational health being smart and healthy. Well, how do we do that? Pat talks about in his book 4 disciplines that we need to insist upon in our organizations.
Absolutely. So the first discipline is to build a cohesive leadership team.
Yeah.
That's really quite simple. What that means is for the leadership team to be behaviorally aligned at the top.
Yeah, I look at it as the team needs to be one.
Absolutely.
When they see one member of the team, they see the other member of the team.
Absolutely.
Because they see each other saying the same things.
Absolutely. So all of a sudden, each team member trusts one another. We're vulnerable with one another. Now it's easy to hold each other accountable. And that it almost forces us to focus on results and not on individual needs.
What the one beauty of this whole thing when we look at team is it's not about me. It's not about you. It's about us as a organization, us as a leadership team, us about our cause and why we exist in the marketplace.
Absolutely. So let's go to the second discipline, which is to create organizational clarity. Now, I know we're going to talk about that more in detail through this webinar, but simply to introduce this discipline, clarity just means achieving alignment. We don't want to be confused about where we're headed. And as Pat describes in the book, The Advantage, if leaders can establish clarity on 6 simple but critical questions, then they can really eliminate any discrepancy in their thinking.
Yeah, the key is that if all the leaders have the same answers and they live these questions out,
Yeah.
we have huge clarity in the organization.
agree.
And then the rest of the organization is going to be very focused.
Absolutely.
We're going to talk more about the 6 questions and go into depth on each one of those questions because we think it is so critical to deal with these 6 questions, but critical that we come to get the same view on all these questions.
Absolutely.
And
And you
answers.
talked about the rest of the organizations, Ralph. When leaders complain about the lack of clarity or alignment, they say that my staff just doesn't work well together. They're just not behaviorally aligned. And they think that it's the staff's problem.
Yeah.
But the truth is, leaders don't realize they can't be any deep alignment if the leaders on the top aren't cohesive, if they're not clear about specific things. I like to say this: if leaders stand side by side, shoulder to shoulder with one another, there could be no daylight in between them. You see, any light that escapes between them is blinding to the rest of the organization. It causes disillusionment.
So right. It's good to hear that exactly what you're saying. So let's just go to the number 3, the third discipline that Pac talks about, and it's about over-communicating organizational clarity. So we get this clarity on the 6 questions. We get them well-defined to that leadership team. We work together as a leadership team. Well, now we've got to communicate that to the rest of the organization.
Yeah, and over-communicate that.
Over in different ways. Just communicate and communicate and communicate.
Yeah. See, Ralph, research shows that things need to be mentioned at least 7 times before it sticks with people.
Sure, because people need to know that you believe it.
Absolutely.
It's so often we get intellectual people who typically are leaders and very gifted, and they say things once, say things maybe twice. Maybe 3 is really overdoing it. And they think they've done their job.
Right.
Not even close.
Right. I had a manager once, he wouldn't even do things a second and third time. See, he thought that repeating was admitting that his staff was not intelligent. So he thought it was redundant. Hey, I already told you at the sales conference. In fact, we talked about it last week at the sales meeting. I don't need to repeat it. They already know. But like you just said, Ralph, it's not redundant if what you're communicating is important.
Right.
You need to share it over and over and over
And
again.
try to do it in a different way so that you're not being like a parrot.
Absolutely.
Because that isn't going, then it could be perceived as condescending.
Absolutely.
But if it's done with passion and in different ways, with different examples, and continually brought forward, that is what people need to know. They need to hear that.
They do.
Continually.
Yeah, Samuel Johnson made a comment. He said, people need to be reminded of what they already know more than they need to be instructed in what they don't. So it's so important to have this message repeated, to be communicated over and over again. And what I would say to conclude on this is over-communicating allows those key messages, the things that you've come up with from the first and second discipline, over-communicating allows for those key messages to be cascaded throughout the organization without any confusion.
Yeah. Let me just stop for one moment here, Rishi. One of the things that really has to come clear here on this one is that who's responsible to over-communicate? And so many times we think it's the employee that needs to just, get the message.
Do a better job.
Because we did it once, we told them once or twice.
Right.
Almost in every organization we work, communication is an issue. They say there's not enough communication. I don't know of an organization that has said we give too much communication.
That's right.
I know all kinds that say the opposite. So the key here that I want to bring home is that the responsibility of communication is not the employee, it's the supervisor.
It is.
It's the leader.
It's the leader.
That's why we talk about over-communicate. That's why Pat talks about over-communicate, because it's the leader has to take responsibility, number 1.
Absolutely.
And number 2, has to tell them and tell them and tell them.
Yeah.
Not 7 times, 100 times.
Absolutely. See, that cascading of those details have to come from the top and then throughout the organization.
Yeah. Let's go to discipline 4.
Sure. So the fourth discipline is to reinforce organizational clarity through human systems. So everything that we've discovered on discipline 1, discipline 2, discipline 3, now we need to reinforce it through our human systems. All of a sudden, we're talking about culture. We're aware of the behaviors and the values that are essential in our organization, and then we won't tolerate people who violate them.
I love what you said. We will not tolerate people that violate our values. We will just insist, even if it hurts us.
That's right.
A lot of times it's so hard to make those tough decisions. But boy, when they undermine our values or they undermine things, we really don't have much choice.
Well, this is it. When you establish clarity in that area, When now it's clear. Listen, when I hire somebody, when I promote somebody, or if I need to fire somebody, it's going to be based on these principles, on these values, this culture that we're trying to establish. This is what's most important to my organization. So now I'm held accountable to do that.
Yeah. We need employees that are committed. So when we do the hiring, like you say, we need to make sure there's a natural fit. Critical that we just don't hire based upon skills only.
Absolutely.
A lot of times what we're doing, and you brought it up in the part about smart and healthy, is we look at the smart. That's because when we look at the hiring, what we typically do is look at the smart only as well.
Right.
We don't look at whether there's a cultural fit. What does Southwest Airlines do? They insist on trying to understand where is the employee from a fit and a culture perspective.
Absolutely. Now, this is super, super simple, right? But just imagine this. If all we did was hire the right people, that would drastically reduce our turnover.
Well, I think number one, hiring the one is critical. And if we don't have the person, we don't fill the position because we have the best candidate. It's got to be one that fits from a culture side and secondly from a skill side.
Right.
And there may be some other things as well, but that's critical.
Yeah.
Second is we need to keep reminding the people what our culture is, what's acceptable, what's not, because it's natural for us to somewhat, move away from what we may think or just because we are selfish.
Right.
So we got to remind the people what we are committed to and help the employees also know that, so that in our performance systems and our accountability systems, we insist on this culture, that we insist on how we do things in this company or organization.
Absolutely. So we'll get to talk more about our values and our culture and how we define it as we go through our 6 questions.
But I think it's just critical that those 4 disciplines they kind of just fit together as a glove.
They do.
Leadership team, getting clarity, over communicating it, and then reinforcing it.
Absolutely.
And Pat does all together.
And Pat does a really good job, but capturing all those points in the Advantage. So really highly recommend you get that book.
So Rishi, let's go to the focus of today, and that is talking about creating organizational clarity.
Wonderful.
Organizations need clarity. We've talked a bit about that in the intro of this webinar already, how critical it is for employees to know where the organization is going.
Yeah, where we're headed.
Pat has put out 6 questions, and if we answer those 6 questions, we get a really good assessment of our clarity as an organization that we then communicate to the rest of the organization.
That's right.
So let's start with the first question.
Sure. So the first question is, why do we exist? Now, this is the underlining or foundational reason for being. It's also known as the core purpose. Now, most of the time, this is more than just making money.
Well, I would say all the time.
It should be, Ralph.
I don't think there can be a core purpose that is about making money. Your core purpose always has to be beyond making money. Always.
I agree.
Because if it's only about making money for you, why would employees want to work for you or work in this organization?
Absolutely.
So you got to give them some alternative or, idealistic, reason to work for your organization.
Yeah, I love what you said, Ralph. It's got to be completely idealistic. Many leadership teams think that this is going to be way too grand or aspirational, but that's the whole point. We just recently did a offsite with a leadership team.
Yes.
And what we came up with as their core purpose was that they were going to save lives.
And they were sincere about it.
Absolutely.
Don't think this was something that was flippant of any sort.
No.
They were adamant that part of working in this company beyond making money was to have an impact in our society.
Absolutely. And think about it, saving lives. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah.
But see, that's what their company was most excited about, like you said.
Yes.
It gets their staff awake every morning and they're happy to come into work every day.
Who wouldn't? I mean, talk about something beyond making money to add value to our society. That's got to tug at people's hearts.
That's wonderful. Employees in every organization need to know that at the heart of what they do lies something grand, something bigger than themselves, right?
So, for businesses, beyond making money a core purpose, for not-for-profits, what we want to see is a vision and mission.
Yeah.
Again, a vision that tugs at the heart about our cause, a reason why we exist.
Yeah.
And the mission to give some focus to the organization.
Absolutely. And here's the danger. If you didn't establish that, if you don't have a proper identified core purpose, then companies, they won't have a real collective commitment from their staff.
No.
All of a sudden, they're going to lose their way getting involved in random pursuits. Projects that may seem financially justifiable, but it really doesn't fit with the direction of the organization.
Well, it comes back to this whole premise is, businesses are moving towards not-for-profit type organization. Not-for-profit are becoming more business-like. And what that's really getting at is that today's businesses are being forced because of the ownership, because of the stakeholders, because of the customers, because of the employees, are saying it's not just about making money.
Yeah.
You've got to have another reason for your existence. And that's why you're seeing businesses also look at saying, how am I impacting the environment?
Absolutely.
What am I doing to support our communities? All those questions are being asked by their customers. And their customers are determining and pushing companies into saying, what good are you doing beyond making money?
That's right. I have an example and I have to share this, right? I had a client, this is going back a few years ago, and he had a dream that he would retire and sail the seas on a sailboat. Now, Ralph, this was a great dream.
Nothing wrong with the dream.
Right. The challenge was he turned it into a core purpose. So all of a sudden, he got this large model sailboat. He created a custom frame and he put it in the front of his reception area. So that everyone walking in and out, the staff, the clients could see it. What did that do?
And did he explain why he put the boat there?
Well, I don't know if there was an explanation or not, but it was kind of self-explanatory. This is the owner's retirement package.
Yeah.
And of course, employees couldn't relate to that. Like you're talking about clients or customers that are asking about your environmental relationship. Clients couldn't relate to that.
No.
So what happened? Nobody was passionate about the company's mission to send the owner away on a sailboat. And all of a sudden, people were working for a paycheck. And what did that result in? A high turnover, low morale?
Well said. Great example. How could you add to that? Got to have a core purpose beyond making money. And
absolutely.
And it doesn't have to be so idealistic. When you think of yourself, but we started our business because we wanted to create some employment. These core purposes could be more basic, like we hire certain people so that we can provide for their families.
Yeah.
There could be some real merit to that. So let's not discount. It just has to be authentic.
It does have to be authentic. Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that the stuff starts with the leaders.
Yes.
Right? I believe leaders need to inspire their people to let them know why it's worth doing their job in the first place.
Yeah.
So that people, like we said, get out of bed in the morning excited to go to work because there's a real reason why their job matters.
Yeah. I think this is going to continue as transparency continues to happen in our society. I think core purpose is going to continue to be brought to the forefront.
I agree.
And that is really where some of this core purpose is so critical. I think in the past, you could hide your core purpose and say it's all about making money and it's about making money for me or for the shareholders. Don't think
so
that's
much
going to
today.
fly so well in our society
True.
today.
That's true.
So that's one question that Pat has said we need to get clarity on and then to communicate that. Second question is, how do we behave? So what are the values that we insist upon
Right.
are in our organization?
Yeah. And values are critical, right, Ralph? I mean,
You bet.
values define a company's personality.
Yeah.
It provides employees with clarity about how to behave and it reduces the need, I hate to say this, but for demoralizing micromanagement.
Well, values are critical. We need to understand what is the expectations of my behavior.
That's right.
What does this organization require? And is this a fit for me personally?
Correct.
And for some, like if it's going to be one of the values is sell, 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 and we're just done to sales, and that's just not who I am.
That's right.
Well, then I better get out of the organization.
Absolutely.
But if it's an organization where I'm a real strong fit, well, then I'm going to just excel in that organization. So let's talk a little bit about Pat talks about 4 types of values.
Yeah. And you know what? Pat actually wrote a wonderful article in Harvard Business Review on these 4 values. So if you'd like to see a copy of it, write to us and we'll be happy to send it to you.
Yeah. So let's start off with, and these are not in order, but the first value that I want to just talk about is permission to play value. And what that is, it's a value that every organization, or all your competition, other organizations that are like-minded to you, have the same values.
Yeah, it's kind of like the minimal behavioral standard.
Yeah.
Right?
Things like honesty.
Yeah.
I mean, name me an organization that doesn't expect honesty.
Right.
Another one you could almost say is respect.
Correct. Integrity.
Yes. Customer service of a certain level.
Now, they were really important.
Critical.
Can't ignore it. But they don't really
differentiates.
Yeah,
they don't differentiate
exactly.
us. And that's why they're called permission to play. Like you said, they're minimal values. And if we don't have those values and if we don't live and we're not honest and we're not respectful, there's a good chance we will be fired. And rightly so, because we're
Correct.
not living according to those values. So
Correct.
important to define those permission to play values.
Right.
Second value is aspirational. So we say that we're going to do everything with excellence. Meanwhile, we don't ever love it. We say we're going to be the best customer service focused organization, but our customers keep complaining.
It's kind of like a wish or something.
It is a wish.
It's something that you wish you already had.
Yeah.
You're not there yet.
And we won't fire if they don't. So somebody messes up 5 times, they're still on our payroll. Why? Because it's aspirational.
Absolutely.
We aspire to it. We do not insist that we live it. So our second value that Pat talks about.
Right.
Third value, and then again, this is not in order, is accidental value.
Right.
So it's a value that creeps into the organization, but it was not planned.
Right.
It just kind of falls in the organization.
You just kind of, after a while, discover that it unintentionally developed. It's a behavioral trait that we didn't strategically implement.
Yeah, and some of these values can be, we'll give preferential treatment to family members
Sure.
in our organization.
Sure.
Didn't plan for that, or of the leaders.
Sure.
Didn't plan for that, but it just kind of crept into the organization, and it's just there.
Yeah, we had a team where it became more casual hours. So instead of showing up at 8:30 to 5:30, staff was coming in between 9:30 to 10, and some of them left between 4:35 to 6, somewhere around that line.
Great.
And over the years, it just became something that was expected that, hey, if you work here, you can come in anytime between 9 to 10. But when a new management team came in, they recognized, wait a second, we never established this as an actual value.
Yeah.
It just became a tendency that developed over time,
Yeah.
and they needed to make some changes.
Some would even say, some of this professionalism is another example, and how casual the dress may be.
Sure.
And people wearing shorts to work in a business workplace.
It slowly creeped in.
Rightly or wrongly, it just accidentally got in there. And
Right.
the question the organization has to ask is, so do I want to drive it out?
That's right.
Typically, accidental values are values that we want to drive out of the organization. So we need to, again, clearly articulate that and then do what we need to do to drive that accidental value out, because it's an accident that's come into our organization. Now, the fourth value, and this is the one that is critical that Pat talks about, is our core values.
Yeah.
And the core values are things that differentiate us from the competition or from others, make us unique. And what is it that we stand for that makes us what we are?
Absolutely. It's like 2 or 3 behavioral traits that are absolutely inherent to that organization. And this is the thing, it must already exist. So we talked about aspirational and accidental values. I had a client once who wanted sense of urgency to be a core value. My guys are super lazy. They just never take things seriously. And really, sense of urgency needs to be a core value. Well, it might need to be one, but it isn't one because you don't currently have it. Yeah. It's not your organization's
you may still
identity.
push that one to become a core, but boy, you've got to really work at that.
Correct. So right now, it's an aspirational value.
If you look at Southwest Airlines again, they've got their core values so well defined. That they just when they do in their hiring,
Absolutely.
they just have to fit. That whole thing about fun, atmosphere, that is a value that they hold strongly to, part of their strategy as well. And also when it comes to hiring, they do an exceptional job of ensuring that the person that they're bringing on has that value in place.
And see, this is what we said. If you have clarity amongst those values that are most important to your organization, then you can attract the right employees and it drastically reduces your turnover. You'll never hire somebody if they don't have them. You won't make decisions internally if it'll violate those values. And you know what else is interesting is you'll also attract or repel the right customers.
Oh, so true. It's interesting when we talk about values. If I think back to some of the material that's written on values in the past, so often it was about values coming from the grassroots up. So it's values that the employees have, and these are the values of our organization. Well, Pat talks about them differently, and so do we. Values have to be driven from the top down.
They do.
What are the values that we think we hold and are critical to our organization.
Absolutely.
And that we're willing to live within and we think are huge to impact the culture of the organization. Those are the ones that we need to articulate as core and permission to play. And then we just drive them and communicate them through the organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, for our team at Strive, we've done a good job of establishing our values and communicating them to every single new employee. And for us, these are considered non-negotiable.
Yeah.
It's how we hire. It's how we fire.
Yeah. And if you don't want to live within them, find a place where you can fit better.
Absolutely.
At the same time, these are pretty strong expectations that we have of you to live within. So that's the number 2 point that Pat talks about of organizational clarity. So first, why do we exist? Second, how do we behave? Third one is, what do we do?
Right. And this is really simple. All it does is it provides some sort of a direct explanation for the business. Now, opposite to the first question, which is why do we exist? When it comes to what do we do, this is not idealistic. This is not some sort of an ambiguous statement. This is what we can call a business definition. It's a definition of what the organization actually does. Yeah. Nothing fancy, nothing abstract. For example, if you're a hospital, your what do we do answer could be, we care for people in their time of need.
Yeah.
If you're a power company, you could say, we provide hydro.
Yeah.
Simple. What we're looking at is 1 sentence, 2 sentence, simple statement. Somebody once said, I'm not sure when this term came out, but they called it an elevator pitch.
Yeah.
It's something that you can share with somebody between the space of time it takes to go from one floor to the next on an elevator.
People want to know, what the organization does. Absolutely. And where do they fit in?
Yeah.
So just like we talk about it, we have a motivational for why we exist. This is about what we do.
Right.
And people want to know where they fit into what the organization does.
Absolutely. So another example, if you're a hiring agency, your business definition could simply be, we connect people with jobs.
Yeah.
It's not an ambiguous statement, like I said. And unlike the first question, the business definition may change over time based on market conditions.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the fourth question. And the fourth question that Pat suggests that we all need to get clarity on is, how will we succeed?
Right. And this basically, Ralph, just gets down to strategy. How do we make intentional decisions that are going to differentiate from our competition and ensure that we have the best chance to succeed? So simply put, this is our organization's plan for success.
A lot of times we call them anchors or drivers, because they become the foundation of our success from a strategy perspective.
Absolutely.
And this is from a business perspective. If I'm going to talk about fulfilling my cause as an organization, let's say a not-for-profit, or if I'm going to be in business, well, what's going to be unique about me that's going to drive success?
Absolutely.
To fulfill my cause or to sell my product or services, etc.
Right, and you call that an anchor, right? And typically it's about 3 different anchors where we'll intentionally use that, and it's going to influence every single decision we make.
Yeah. What drives every decision, because they become a filter that we make. For every decision that we look at, we filter it against those 3 and say, does it fit or does it not?
Yeah, I love that term, filter. Absolutely. It's like a lens.
It is.
Or a filter. And so now these decisions, they have to be evaluated through that filter to ensure consistency.
So Pat talks about Southwest Airlines on a regular basis. Southwest Airlines filters, anchors, drivers are, 1, low fares, low cost, right? Low fares is what it's all about.
Right.
So they can fulfill, their intention of bringing families together. Second critical one that is a business driver strategy is on time.
Right.
People were always complaining that planes were always late. They made it a priority to be on time.
Right.
Third one for them is this whole thing of customer satisfaction or fun. So they have identified those 3, you could say, strategies, drivers,
right,
and everything they do now reinforces those. So let's talk a little bit about the Southwest Airlines and how everything they do filters around those.
Well, it's quite simple. Even if somebody in their leadership team comes up with a really cool idea, you see, regardless how cool that idea is, if it doesn't, you said it was low fares on time, or this fun-loving spirit / customer service. If it doesn't apply to every one of these three strategic anchors, it doesn't matter how cool the plan is or the idea is, it doesn't fly.
But it does take away barriers too, though. And you're so right, Rishi. Each idea is filtered through this. Why do you think they have basically one type of plane? So that, again, it's much simpler, lower cost, all these benefits.
Absolutely.
Why do they typically not assign seats? Lower cost, more on time.
Absolutely.
Everything, all the decisions, and they've kind of, taken the whole airline industry and turned it upside down, and some of the, you could say, untouchables, things that we would never consider doing. Why does Southwest not have first class? Again, it doesn't go with low fares, and on time. It just gets in the way with that.
Absolutely. And there's so much distraction when you try to do something outside of your core or outside of your strategic anchors.
Yeah.
When you have this established, like we said earlier, it creates a context for all decision making.
It does.
Now, all of a sudden, the companies will avoid the temptation, so in this case, Southwest Airlines, of making purely pragmatic or opportunistic decisions that often end up diminishing the company's plan for success. We think it's a great financial opportunity, but really it's working against us.
Well, just take Southwest. So they had let's say if they had an opportunity to buy a completely different airline, it would be really difficult for them to absorb them in with their strategy.
Absolutely.
Because they are, a lot of times will not fit.
Right. And so if another, you said an airline, if they had, or even a manufacturer, so if Boeing was to call and say, hey, we have this overage of inventory and we can give you these 10 or 50 planes at 50% of the price, but it's not the one that they've identified as the one that they're
using.
Here's
all the business class or first class executive seats.
They wouldn't buy it.
Yeah.
They'd walk away from it. Very easy to make that decision now because they have the three strategic anchors, and every decision has to be measured by these three strategic anchors.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to talk about Strive. In our company, we have our strategic anchors as well. Our first one is engage for change. Our second is to build meaningful relationships. And our third is simple wisdom. So if I have an opportunity to work with a client and, he's really not looking for a long-term relationship, he just wants me to come in, do a half-day workshop on something, and that's it, and never talk to me again, I probably won't pursue that because our strategic anchor is build meaningful relationships.
Well, and engage for change.
Absolutely.
If a person is not wanting to grow, and the reason the whole focus is on change is because that's part of growth.
It is.
If an organization or if an individual does not want to continue to grow and to build the organization or to build the employees, it's just not a right fit. If the person themselves don't benefit from our services, and also if Strive doesn't benefit from working with a client because we gain wisdom and knowledge from them as well, again, we're not creating the win-win that we think is critical. And third is if they don't value the materials, the concepts, the principles, that's okay, but that's who we are because we want to take conceptual material and make it simple.
And make it simple.
And make it practical and make it something that they can go and implement into their organization.
So, and you and I and all the other consultants here, we're tasked with that, to come up with simple, practical suggestions because it's one of our core values, simple principles.
Yeah.
Simple wisdom.
Yeah. So that takes us to 4 questions. 5th question, which is now also critical, is what is most important right now? And when Pat asked that question, what is most important right now? What we're trying to do is create some urgency for some change. Pat talks about, if you look at an emergency room or if you look at a house burning down, everybody together works at a common cause.
That's right.
And everybody knows what's most important right now.
Yeah.
And it's a form of crisis.
Yes.
But what Pat talks about is what is our rallying cry?
Right.
What's most important right now within the next 3 to 12 months?
Yeah.
That we think is critical that would really enhance our organization.
It's like, absolutely. It's like an established focus. We're going to concentrate on a particular area with the most immediate tangible outcome or impact. And typically it's over a measurable period of time. So 3 to 6 to 12 months, whatever the case might be. And you talked about firemen or emergency workers. What we're talking about there is departmental silos
Yeah.
or the absence of departmental silos.
I think that's even better, the absence of.
I've never heard a fireman or even you said emergency workers at a hospital. I've never heard somebody cross their hands and say, well, that's not my job. I'm not gonna do it. Somebody else can help
How
them.
quick do you think they'd be fired if that was the case?
Wouldn't survive.
Yeah, but we seem to allow that in departments.
We did. You know why? I think that most organizations have so many top priorities. You know, they want to cover all bases, and they got this huge laundry list of things that need to happen, this desperate objective list, that they spread themselves so thin. You know, their time, their energy, their resources. Nobody really knows what's most important, what they need to focus on. And this creates disillusionment with the staff.
Yeah. So anyways, we'd like you to determine something in the 3 to 9 months, up to 12, because if it's over 12 months, it becomes less urgent.
It is.
If it's under 3 months, typically it's fairly easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we want a rallying cry. We want you to just say, what are the parts, the sub-objectives underneath that rallying cry, and make them your priorities for the short term.
Right. And that's what Pat calls in the book, The Advantage, he calls it the thematic goal.
Yeah.
To establish something that we're going to focus on, this established focus over the next 3 to how many ever months it is. And if we do this way, then all of a sudden we won't be distracted by anything else.
And it's going to bring the departments together. Because we're all committed to this thematic goal.
Yeah,
we're all committed to those objectives.
Absolutely. We have clear direction on what's most important. So they won't be that departmental silo fight. You know, we're all focused on the same direction, moving in the same direction.
Yeah. You know, in addition to this, Rishi, we also would like them to say, okay, what are the ongoing priorities? What are the ongoing measurements that we also want to do? And what we'd like to create is a scorecard.
Right.
A scorecard where they put the thematic goal in there and the defining objectives for each to fulfill that thematic goal.
Right.
And also all the critical standard, you could say, metrics that we also want to continue to measure. And that becomes, you know, our scorecard. That becomes our roadmap of what we're going to measure on a regular basis.
Yeah. Very helpful. And like we said, that avoids distraction and confusion because we're always focused on what's most important to us right now. You know, when talking about this whole rallying cry or departmental silo, there's something about a crisis that brings out the best in people. Mm-hmm. You know, you mentioned the emergency workers, the firemen, the military. They just get things done because they're in a crisis situation.
Yeah.
But we don't have to wait until a crisis to bring out the best in people. It's unfortunate, but you know, I've had a few examples. I had an organization that the leader told me that they almost went out of business. And just before they did, he made an announcement to his entire team, says, you know, we need to rally together because if we're going to win, we need to fight together on this. And the whole company came together. He said at that time, the staff was the most selfless. They weren't looking at their individual agendas. They were looking at the overall corporate objective. And they fought and they made it happen and they won at the end of the day. But we don't have to wait for that kind of a crisis. People love
to be part of a challenge.
Yeah,
people love to be part of a success. Mm-hmm. People want to be engaged.
Absolutely.
And this is developing a thematic goal and the objectives become part of that whole process.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the sixth question, Rishi, is who must do what?
Yeah.
And that really is, who's going to take responsibility for this and who's going to be assigned with this task.
Absolutely.
And that's pretty straightforward.
It's so simple.
Yeah, but we need to know that so that we can hold the people accountable. We know our responsibilities and we can then fulfill our roles.
You know, in our previous webinar, we had done something on team number 1.
Yeah.
And we said at that webinar that when executives come to meetings, when leaders come to meetings, you shouldn't wear your individual departmental hat.
No.
You know, come to that meeting prepared to talk about the entire organization, to contribute equally throughout the entire organization because you're a cohesive team, right?
And your first role is the success of the organization.
Absolutely.
Not your department.
Absolutely. So regardless of your area of expertise, you're serving the team. Now, as much as we identify that and we know that's important, when it comes to who must do what, there's organizations that have these elaborate organizational charts, and yet we don't really know what the clear roles and responsibilities are. So I truly believe that it's worthwhile to take a little bit of time to clarify what each individual is doing And so that we can agree together that that's what the responsibility is, and so that we can ensure that all critical areas are covered, right? And now you talked about accountability. I can hold people accountable because we know exactly who is doing what.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's just recap. First things that we talked about was organizational health. It is what we would suggest your competitive advantage.
Absolutely.
Greater than being smart. It's about being healthy and smart, number one. 2, we talk about organizational health, the 4 disciplines.
Absolutely. So the first one was to create or to build a cohesive leadership team. The second is what we spent really the better half of this webinar talking about, which is creating organizational clarity. And then once we have that organizational clarity, it's important to over-communicate that organizational clarity. And then finally, to reinforce that with or through our human systems. So those are the 4 disciplines of organizational health, as Pat described in his book, The Advantage.
Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot about the second discipline, creating organizational clarity. 6 questions that we think are critical. And we encourage you and your organizations to go and answer each one of these 6 questions with your leadership team.
Yeah.
Spend time, not superficially, but in depth.
Absolutely.
Answering these 6 questions. And if we can help you in any way
Yeah.
to help you work through those questions, to find the strategy that is foundational, to develop that thematic goal, to clarify your values, to determine your core purpose, whatever parts that we can do to support you,
we're happy.
Give
to
us
do
a
that.
call.
Absolutely. When your executive team, when the members of this leadership team can leave that room completely aligned around these 6 questions that we talked about today, then you can communicate them with your organization. You can tell the rest of the team about it. And all of a sudden you have a company where clarity reigns. And all of a sudden success is becoming quite likely.
Success for the company, organization, success for the employees, success for the leadership team.
Right.
So thank you for joining us today with Rishi and myself. And if there's anything that we at Strive can do to support you and your organization, give us a call.
This has been part 2 of our 4-part series on organizational clarity. Part 3 will be aired on August 29th at 12 noon EDT. To listen to this webinar again or share it with a friend, go to www.strive.com and visit our resource section. If you want to get connected to more of what you heard today, call us at 519-766-9033. It is our aim to continue to provide fresh resources to help leaders lead.